This is how Manchester City's midfield powerhouse ended up leaving for Barcelona, and the timing could hardly have been more dramatic. Rodri, the reigning Ballon d'Or winner and one of the defining players of Manchester City's greatest era, is on his way to Catalonia. And while City were losing the Community Shield without him anywhere near the squad, the biggest transfer story of their summer was already reaching its final stage. But this wasn't a transfer that came out of nowhere. It had been building for months. So how did Manchester City go from wanting Rodri to sign a new contract, to watching him leave for Barcelona? Let's go back to the beginning. Rodrigo Hernandez Cascante arrived at Manchester City in 2019 from Atletico Madrid for a then club record £62.8 million. Over 7 seasons, he became far more than just another expensive signing. He became the player around which City's midfield was built. Rodri made 298 appearances for the club and collected 12 major honors, 4 Premier League titles, 2 FA Cups, 3 League Cups, and the Champions League. Then came 2024. Rodri produced the best football of his career and finished the year with the biggest individual prize in the sport, the Ballon d'Or. At that point, it looked like Manchester City had one of the most valuable midfielders in world football locked down. But football rarely works that neatly. Rodri still had 1 year remaining on his contract. City wanted an extension. Rodri wanted something else. He wanted to return to Spain. And after everything that happened over the following year, that desire only became stronger. His 2024-25 season was badly disrupted by a serious knee injury. He eventually returned, but fitness problems continued to interrupt his rhythm. Then came the summer of 2026. Rodri went to the World Cup with Spain and came back with another major achievement attached to his name. He had just won the tournament and been recognized as one of the competition's outstanding players. For Barcelona, this was the moment the idea of signing him became much more than a dream. It became a real transfer target. And importantly, Barcelona didn't need to convince Rodri. According to reporting around the deal, the player's personal terms were effectively in place before the transfer became public, so the real battle was never about the player.
It was about the price. Barcelona's opening offer was reported at around £38.5 million. Manchester City rejected it, and that immediately told Barcelona one thing: if they wanted Rodri, they were going to have to pay significantly more. The negotiations continued into the weekend of August 15th and 16th. Then everything moved quickly. On Sunday, August 16th, Manchester City played Arsenal in the Community Shield. Rodri wasn't involved. City lost 3-0, and while their new manager Enzo Maresca was dealing with the defeat, reports emerged that Barcelona had finally reached an agreement with City. The following day, Sky Sports reported that Manchester City had accepted Barcelona's bid and that Rodri was preparing to complete his medical. A transfer that had been developing behind the scenes was suddenly real. And that brings us to the most confusing part of the story: the money. Different reports are giving slightly different numbers. The figure being widely reported by British outlets is around £65.4 million. Reuters also reported the deal at that figure, but other reporting around the negotiations has put the total package closer to €76.5 million once add-ons are included. So which number is correct? The easiest way to understand it is this: the headline figure is around £65 million. The larger number comes from potential bonuses and add-ons built into the agreement. And that distinction matters, because for Barcelona, this isn't a cheap opportunity to sign a player nearing his 30s. They're committing serious money to a midfielder who is already 30 and has suffered significant injury problems over the last 2 seasons. Barcelona clearly believe the player is worth the risk. And there is another reason this deal is so important. Rodri isn't just another midfielder. Barcelona are signing a player whose entire game is built around controlling matches, positioning, tempo, passing, ball recovery, and, most importantly, making everyone around him better. That's exactly the type of midfielder Barcelona have been missing. Rodri is expected to sign a 4-year contract, taking the agreement into 2030.
and his arrival at Barcelona could happen almost immediately. The club already has the perfect stage prepared. On Wednesday, August 19th, Barcelona are scheduled to play the Joan Gamper Trophy against Al Ahly at Spotify Camp Nou. The match is also Barcelona's official squad presentation for the new season, and for Rodri, that could mean something symbolic. He won't be walking into a half-empty training ground with cameras watching from a distance. He could be introduced in front of the Camp Nou crowd. A player who spent 7 seasons defining Manchester City's midfield could suddenly be standing on the pitch in Barcelona colors before even training properly with his new teammates. And that brings us to the other side of the deal. Because losing Rodri isn't just a transfer for Manchester City. It's a structural problem. For years, City's midfield had a safety net. Rodri could sit deep, control possession, and protect the defense. So replacing him isn't as simple as buying another midfielder. City have already started planning for life without him. Elliot Anderson has arrived from Nottingham Forest for a reported British transfer record of £116 million. But Anderson isn't a direct Rodri replacement. His game is more box-to-box. He's energetic, powerful, and capable of carrying the ball forward, which makes the next question even more important. Who actually replaces Rodri? One name City have explored is Ayoub Bouadi. The Lille midfielder is only 18 and has already built a reputation as one of Europe's most interesting young central midfielders. Reports have suggested a price around £85 million. But that figure is still speculative, and City would have to decide whether they want to spend heavily on potential or pursue a more established player. Then there's Enzo Fernandez. Chelsea have reportedly valued the midfielder at around £120 million and had set a deadline for bids. City didn't make their move before that deadline. But that doesn't necessarily mean the story is finished. There is a connection here that makes Fernandez particularly interesting. City's new manager, Enzo Maresca, already knows him extremely well from his time at Chelsea. Under Maresca, Fernandez became an important figure in the midfield and was even handed the captain's armband during Reece James's absence. So tactically, there is an obvious connection. But financially, there's a problem. Chelsea know City have just received a huge fee for Rodri. And City know Chelsea know it. That changes the negotiation completely. Then there are other options. Alex Scott has also been discussed. The Bournemouth midfielder brings energy, ball-carrying ability, and aggression in duels, qualities that fit a possession-heavy system, and Alexis McAllister has also been linked with City's midfield plans. The Liverpool midfielder already has Premier League experience, has won major trophies, and offers something very different from a pure defensive midfielder. But all of these names come with the same problem. None of them are Rodri. That's exactly why Maresca sounded so concerned after the Community Shield. He admitted that losing a player of Rodri's level is a huge blow. And he's right. This isn't simply losing one player from a squad. It's losing the player who made a particular style of football work. That is why the fee matters so much. Manchester City are receiving roughly £65 million for a 30-year-old midfielder, with 1 year left on his contract. That sounds like a strong piece of business on paper. But now they have to spend some of that money replacing him. And replacing a player like Rodri usually costs more than simply matching his transfer fee. Because the problem isn't finding a midfielder. The problem is finding one who can eventually do the things Rodri did. Control games, break up attacks, protect defenders, progress the ball, and stay calm when the entire team is under pressure. That is why this transfer could have consequences far beyond the opening weeks of the season. For Barcelona, it's a statement signing. They're getting one of the most important midfielders of his generation. For Rodri, it's a return home and the beginning of a completely different chapter. And for Manchester City, it's the end of one of the most important eras in the club's modern history. The timing makes it even stranger. City have just lost the Community Shield. Rodri wasn't on the pitch. Barcelona are preparing to introduce him to their fans, and City are already looking across Europe for the player who might eventually take his place. So the deal is now moving into its final stage. Manchester City have accepted a bid reported at around £65.4 million, with some reports putting the overall package higher once bonuses are included. Rodri is expected to complete his medical, sign his contract, and begin his new life in Barcelona. Meanwhile, City have less than 3 weeks before the September 1st transfer deadline to solve the biggest midfield problem they've faced in years. One era has ended in Manchester, another is about to begin in Barcelona, and the most remarkable part? Rodri's next chapter is starting before he's even trained once with his new teammates.